Welcome into the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast, a podcast dedicated to everything you need to know about the squad. Hear from players, coaches, broadcasters, and those who cover the NBA on a daily basis. The New Orleans Pelicans Podcast starts right now.
Hi, welcome back to another edition of the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast, the official podcast of your New Orleans Pelicans, joined as always by Jim Eichenhofer, who's carrying around a ball of holly all around his hat there.
Yes, indeed. I'm
very
in the
joyful
holiday
this time of year.
I'm in the holiday spirit. I'm very joyful this time of year, but not as much after last night's game,
That is true. If HR is listening, I'm completely making that up. You're just sitting across from me in a
Yes.
desk, and you're completely in a quarter zip. You're completely fine. No balls of holly everywhere for sure. Although, I'll give you a smooch on the cheek.
HR.
Yeah. So last night, man, four in a row, up 24. Look, that's a tough loss. There's no other way to look at it. It is. But what was interesting is obviously looking at the comments and the fans, and it's like, why can't we play well on TNT? If I hadn't watched the game or watched the games on a normal basis, say my sister lives in Burlington, Vermont, doesn't have league pass, and the Pelicans are on. Whoa, the last time they were on TNT, not so good as well. What is it? Is it something with them playing on TNT? Are there similarities? Are there differences? What do you see with those two games?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of a coincidence, the part about these last two games that they've played on TNT. But I did think that, what we should have done today, Gus, is come in and record two separate podcasts. The first one is with someone who's only watched the two games on TNT. The second one is with someone who's either watched all of the games or just the games that haven't been on TNT, because I feel like we'd be getting two completely different takes and reactions. I know which of the two would get higher ratings and would get more clicks, but I also know the one that would be more grounded in reality and kind of a reasonable perspective as far as just looking at the scope of the entire season. But yeah, it's been disappointing, unfortunately, that definitely wouldn't say the two worst performances of the season, but maybe the worst performance of the season was on TNT, and then the most kind of devastating loss as far as having the lead that they did against a team that is pretty disliked, the Grizzlies around here, ends up as in a loss. So yeah, it's just been two games on TNT. Fortunately, they're not going to be on TNT for several months, so we're good on that front for a while.
There you go. But it is going to be a revenge tour. We'll hit on that here coming up next segment, as we will be joined by John Deshazier, color analyst on the New Orleans Pelicans radio network. So we'll have some fun with that here. Just one quick final thing on that. There were two different games, right? The Laker game and the Grizzlies game were two different games. The one similarity for me is obviously Ja and what LeBron did, but there were two different games.
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of positives that happened in the game against the Grizzlies, and if, we could play the coulda, shoulda, woulda game all day, but if the Pelicans win that game by 2 points, the conversation that we're having today is so much different, and we're going through that Brandon Ingram had 34 points, and CJ McCollum had 5 threes in the first half, and that they had a 28-2 run that they looked very dominant in that second quarter. All that stuff is kind of out the window, though, when you lose a game the way that they did, and just bottom line, it ends up being a game that you don't close out. So the game against the Lakers, I think, was not a game where you could say, well, if this happened and the ball bounced here and, the refs screwed us on this call, there was just no way that you could slice that game into anything positive. So, yeah, definitely two games that you can't really compare from a performance standpoint, but obviously the bottom line is that you go 0-2 in those two games.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, let's break down the game a little more with somebody that actually is knowledgeable with what he saw last night. All right, welcome in John Deshazier, color analyst for the Pelicans on the Pelicans radio network. And JD, I think one of the things that we look at this game is it's why, how, right? Those are the questions. How did this happen? Why did this happen? We can break down specific similarities. But when you and I talked after the game, what was the number one thing that popped in your head as to why the Pelicans failed to close that game out?
Well, the autopsy is always the difficult part, right? Really, I didn't think they defended at a really good level in the second half. And I guess when you give up 74 points in the second half, the proof is in that pudding. I didn't necessarily think that they guarded Ja Morant the way we would like to have seen them guarded. Now, Ja Morant is a superstar. He is a superstar. But it was his first game back, and I just thought he got into a rhythm, and I was just hoping that the Pelicans would kind of dedicate a little bit more bodies to him and say, okay, you got it going. You're cooking right now. Let's see if Desmond Bane can make a shot. Let's see if Jaren Jackson Jr. can make a shot. Let's see if Bismack Biyombo can help you out. Let's just see if the supporting cast, who had been standing around kind of watching him for a little while, let's see if they can get into a rhythm, because I think the Pelicans got out of rhythm a bit offensively by watching Brandon Ingram, who was fantastic, by the way, watching him down the stretch. And I don't know if that contributed to C.J. McCollum missing a couple of threes, but I thought the offense got a little stagnant. B.I. had the ball. They were watching him work. He was scoring. You were getting what you needed out of him. And then when it was time for somebody else to step into that role to make a shot, we saw Zion Williamson miss a layup, even though JV comes in and taps it in. We saw C.J. miss a couple of threes. And so I just thought the Pels might have gotten a little bit out of rhythm that way. And I just wanted to see maybe if Memphis was out of rhythm similarly, because John Morant had the ball in his hands and he was going downhill, and there was no way to stop him one-on-one. And I understand the Pelicans' thought process. Herb Jones is one of the elite defenders in the world because he's long, he's athletic, he bothers people. But on this particular evening, in these particular situations, it was where, yeah, you trust Herb, you love Herb, you know what kind of defender he is, but sometimes the guy just has a guy's number for a while, and it seemed like John Morant just kind of had him for a while. So, I don't necessarily know if switching up bodies on John Morant was going to do it. I thought maybe throwing an extra body or two to him to get it out of his hands might have helped. But other than that, I mean, it's one of those things where, you get a guy on a roll like that, and it's hard to get him off of it. So you got to do something different, I think. One
of the elements of Ja's game specifically that surprised me was he had 7 points in the first half and then 27 in the second half. It's kind of the opposite of what I would think from a guy who hasn't played in a long time.
Yeah.
That he goes off. And there was a specific point in the game where Zion was dribbling up the court in transition, and Ja just kind of gave a foul because he pointed immediately to the bench saying,
he had to
I'm
get
winded.
off the court. Yeah, he had to get off the court. He was exhausted.
I thought he twisted his ankle or something the way he took off.
No, he was like, I'm exhausted. My chest is burning. Get me out of here. Let me take a couple of deep breaths on the bench. And I thought, okay, I'm like Jim. I thought, well, you know what? He's going to be a little bit weak down the stretch. He's kind of folding up here in the first half. He doesn't have it. So, down the stretch, his legs might give out on it.
And that was part of why what he did. I mean, you have to say, tip your cap to the guy. Amazing performance in the fourth quarter, especially and down the stretch. But to your point, as far as, having extra guys run at him, it seemed like maybe they would have been more effective trying to wear him out and wear him down at the end of the game. But it was just beyond impressive and I guess a little bit surprising that he was able to do what he did, given the way he looked at points earlier in the game and the fact that he hadn't played in an NBA game in 8 months.
Yeah, I thought the coach did a really good job using his timeouts kind of judiciously. One, to stop the runs, hopefully, and two, to kind of give Ja a little bit more time to, catch his breath, a little bit more rest time on the bench, to kind of recollect himself. I mean, but yeah, it was an elite performance. I wish it had been an elite performance and a loss for them because, he really pulled them out of it. They didn't look like they had a lot of hope and belief by halftime. I mean, it looked like, I think the Pels had like a 23-2 run on them.
Yeah.
And when you get that kind of run, that's kind of dispiriting. But they hung around, man. This is the NBA, and dudes hang around. And, before you know it, a 24-point lead can be, 18 and then 13 and then 8. And the next thing you know, the opponent feels like they can win.
You guys like my tinfoil Santa hat that I fashioned out of this here? I'm not going conspiracy theory here. I'm just, it's just the season. C.J. McCollum said it. How about that? I'll just use that. He said there were some very unique whistles. Let's just say that. Some very unique whistles. But I will say this, JD, to the point whether or not you agree or not, you said in the broadcast there were fouls. Some of those are now Herb Jones tripping on himself isn't a foul.
Yeah.
But for most, even the Zion 2 fouls by the 10-minute mark of the first quarter, you said it was a foul. Now, is it touch? Is it ticky-tack? You can, but they were fouls. Now, I jokingly said it in the studio, said there's no way the league's going to make this a blowout. I mean, this is a back-to-back night. They're going to make sure they do that. And the reason why I say that, JD, is not conspiratorial. It's when the game is slowed and muddy like that, it helps the team that played last night. It helps the guy that hasn't played basketball because, guys, there wasn't a lot of running. There wasn't, when you look at the clock and you go, man, it's 4 minutes that went off before the timeout. I mean, the game before that, John, in San Antonio, the first media timeout, my scoreboard update in the fourth quarter was at the 5-minute mark. So you didn't have that. It was whistle, whistle, whistle. There were 11 personal fouls in the first quarter. That helps you keep your wind. That helps the guys that are tired. Again, I'm not saying they did it on purpose, because to your point, there were fouls. They were called a certain way.
And I mean, NBA officiating is such a difficult job. So, basically as a coach and as players, you just want consistency. And I thought there was a decent amount of consistency.
Right.
I thought the first 2 fouls on Z were fouls. The third one where we came up with the blocking foul, I didn't like that one. Desmond Bain tripping over his own feet, obviously don't like that one. But I thought for the most part, most of them were clear fouls. The Bismack Biyombo foul, where he ends up, getting the foul for pushing somebody, where he basically just put his hand on his back. He was like,
no, that's right. I mean,
okay, I'll take it.
It was 23 Pels fouls to 19 Grizzlies fouls. So it's not like there was a 31-10 disparity. But the point is, all of those calls slow the game down.
Yeah, they slowed the game down. But the flip side is, Pels were up 24. Even with some of the stuff that was going on that you didn't like, they were up 24. So, it was slowed down. It was not pleasing to the eye for a good portion of it. But the Pels really found the accelerator, and I mean, they hit it, and they hit it hard in the second quarter. So you felt like, okay, the Pels have kind of found their footing here. Memphis has kind of, drifted back to where they were going to be in this game, because it was Ja's first game back, and had they lost by 15 or 20, I think Memphis would have been like, hey, Ja came out healthy, we're fine, we got what we wanted out of it. But they played hard. I'll give them this. When Morant was on the floor, he played hard, and they looked like a different team. And that's why he was so winded early in the game, because he, working out is different than playing an NBA game. And so he was winded and he was exhausted, and I was like, okay, the Pels got him exactly where they want him here. And then the second half came out, and it was just flat, and it was, you knew they were in trouble, but you felt like, okay, there's still a little bit of workable margin here, because it's 6-8 points, and, can they find a little something again just to get to the end of the game, not to blow them out, just to get to the end of the game, and they just couldn't find it.
I thought it was a very disjointed game from the standpoint of the whistle kept blowing and it kept stopping the action. Somebody tweeted that the first half had the rhythm of, and they posted a GIF of Elaine from Seinfeld doing her dance, and they said that was the kind of rhythm that the game had. But, to your point earlier, Gus, I think in addition to helping Ja have all these breathers because of all the stoppages, I mean, from an even more tangible standpoint, it gave the Grizzlies offense a big boost. And beyond Ja, they're not a great offensive team. They've been one of the worst offensive teams in the league. So unless he has an explosive second half and plays great, a lot of games they're not going to be able to put up enough points. But because they were able to get to the free throw line, that helped them so much, as far as they end up with 115 points. They end up with a huge number in the second half. And so, I mean, I think that was the biggest thing. There's going to be a lot of games I think teams go into against the Grizzlies where they put at the top of, or near the top of the chalkboard, do not put them at the free throw line, do not, help their offense the way that they did. I thought JD did a good job of kind of breaking down, some of the pros and cons of the calls. I don't want to sit here and complain specifically about a bunch of different calls. I thought that JD used the word consistency. I thought they were consistent from the standpoint of that they officiated the game tightly. So that was the reason why there were so many calls, because anytime somebody dribbled, if there was a little bit of a hand check or there was a little bit of a hip into a guy, there was a foul and there was free throws. And CJ mentioned too, really problematic last night. Grizzlies got into the bonus, into the penalty so early in a couple quarters. And so now you're giving them free throws on a play where somebody's 25 feet from the basket, makes a little dribble move, gets a little hip or a little hand, and all of a sudden now he's shooting free throws. Whereas that happened way too often last night.
Those are breathers for a team that played the night before. I mean, they just are. I mean, it stops the game to that standpoint. You heard a lot, especially after post-game, coach, players say it as well. Rebounding. It's surprising. And sometimes we feel a certain way watching the game and after the game. Is 3 rebound difference that big a difference? 42-39, because it felt differently, right? It felt like every second chance point or second hustle or things of that nature went that way. But They had 13 offensive rebounds, Pelicans 11. They had 29 defensive rebounds, Pelicans 28. Overall, it was 42-39. But it felt like they got a lot more different rebounds, didn't they, than elsewhere.
Yeah, a lot of it is when you get them. It can be even in the final statistical analysis, but when do you get them? And on top of that, it's critical defensive possessions where they tap it out, and they get a second chance. So, the second chance points played big in this one, but again, it's when you get them because, you might not have an offensive rebound for, 3 or 4 or 5 minute stretch, but if you're on the comeback run and you're able to get one, kick it out, and you end up with a 3, now all of a sudden that's a huge offensive rebound. So at first it started out dominant rebounding. I think they had a 16-8 advantage at one point. It evened out, but it was when they got them because the Pels really needed to finish off defensive possessions, and they couldn't secure the basketball to finish out the possession.
Offensive production in the NBA right now is at the highest level it's been in so long, in, 20, 30 years. CJ talked about how it's getting more and more difficult to stop a team on the first try that they get. But if you give them the second and third opportunity, you're really in trouble. One of the things I noticed about the offensive rebounding by the opponents this year, so New Orleans defensive rebounding, during the game last night when the Grizzlies got a couple crucial offensive rebounds, I feel like we talked about this a lot at the beginning of the season, and then it hasn't really come up very much. So I looked up the most offensive rebounds that the Pelicans have given up in a game this season, and it kind of verified what I thought. The 5 games where they've given up the most offensive rebounds were all before November 15th. So you're talking in the first, maybe 10, 12 games of the season, this was a problem. And then for a while, they've really done a good job of cleaning it up, but unfortunately, it came back to bite them in a crucial situation. And I agree 100% with what JD said. I mean, it's not last night wasn't even in the top 7 or 8 as far as most offensive rebounds by a Pelicans opponent, right. But the timing of when they gave those up was so crucial, especially from a momentum standpoint. There's a bunch of times where I think if the Pelicans had gotten a stop, the Grizzlies emotionally would have been kind of not defeated, but been like, oh man, this is going to be really tough to come back because we can't score when we need these possessions that are monumental in the game. But I mean, they were able to get a couple of those second chance baskets that were just continued to keep them in the game and got it to where I think when it was down, once they got it down to like 6, I think they had to look around and be like, we can definitely win this game now.
It's like a paper basket box score. It's like you look at it this morning, you want to crumple it up and just toss it because it's nuts. You had better 3-point percentage, 44-33. You, as I said, had more assists, 23-19. Steals was 5-4. Total turnovers, they had 18. You had 11, but you only converted, JD, 21 points out of those 18 turnovers. And it's one thing that's, I think Graf has an ulcer based off of layups. Why can't this team finish fast breaks? And more importantly, can they dunk? Is there a sign we can hold? Can we get Aaron Summers, who's on the baseline, dunk the ball on a fast break, please?
It's guys are trying to get it up fast. And I think sometimes, I know last night I would assume they were trying to get it up fast a couple of times because Jaren Jackson, you got a shot blocker. But I also thought, being outscored to 62-50 in the paint, the Pels didn't hit them where they were weakest, which is, I think, around the rim. Because Steven Adams makes a huge difference for them. He wasn't on the floor. Now, I know Jaren Jackson Jr. is out there. He's a shot blocker. But he can only guard so many people at a time before, you should be able to shake somebody free. And I thought the Pels were going to handle them in the paint. Now, it doesn't help when Zion Williamson is spending more time on the sidelines than we are.
Yeah.
That doesn't help. But I felt like he and JV would be able to kind of crank it up down there, and even Brandon Ingram a little bit. And to see it go the other way, basically, specifically, primarily, maybe only because of Ja Morant, because he's attacking the rim and they get 62 points in the paint. And it's like that's discouraging because they have a weakness there, even with Ja Morant back, that you've got to be able to take advantage of because that is your strength. Your strength is beating folks up in the paint. And their weakness right now is stopping people in the paint because they don't have those big bodies. So I thought the Pels, would be a little bit better there. And that was a little bit disappointing.
That's one of the reasons why we almost never see the Pelicans shoot threes well and lose a game because they're so good in the paint that if you that's almost like something that you you treat as a reliable thing that you're going to outscore the other team in the paint, or you're going to do well in that category. So that was definitely a rarity that they shot threes as well as they did, and to a level that was significantly better than the opposing team, and they still ended up with a loss.
All right, so JD, you said it in the broadcast as well, and Jim and I talked about it in the opening segment. The beauty of the NBA is, well, they're on the flight today, and they have to play Cleveland tomorrow, and Cleveland just got done earlier this week with a back-and-forth game with Houston. It's a dangerous team, even though they got some issues there. There's a lot of, rumor out there. Donovan Mitchell could be going to Miami and all this other stuff. So bottom line, what took place on Tuesday can serve to be kind of what happened with LA or other tough losses. You learn from it. Now, a sign of growth is how do you respond to it? You can't let one loss turn into two, right?
Yeah, and the Pels have been pretty good about that. I mean, the Pels are 16-12. Now, here's the I don't want to say problem, but here's the issue with that, I guess. From a national perspective, they know about 2 games from the Pelicans, right?
Yes.
The Lakers game in Vegas and last night's game. And so the national perspective is this team isn't ready. This team is this and this team is that. But they're 16-12. And they got some good wins in there. They've beaten a good Sacramento team. They've beaten a good Dallas team. There are some good wins in there. Now, so we know this team can play. Cleveland's kind of dragged this team around a little bit in Cleveland the last couple of years. It's been tough sledding there. It's like, even when they didn't have Donovan Mitchell, it was like, you went to Cleveland and you just didn't feel good about it because the Cavs have been able to handle them. So this would be a good bounce back game against the Cavaliers team that seems to be teetering a little bit. You mentioned the rumors with Donovan Mitchell and that they don't seem to be quite as focused as you would think that team would be this season. And so this might be a decent time to catch them. It certainly should be a decent time to catch them for the Pelicans because, the last thing that we remember from the Pelicans is giving up a 24-point lead. You want to show you're not that team. You're the team that built the 24-point lead, and now you want to be the team that's able to extend it. We saw the road trip where they just smashed, a couple of teams, San Antonio and Washington. So we know they can perform on the road. Those were bad teams, of course, but you've got to be able to impose your will on bad teams too, and you got to be able to do hopefully the same thing against pretty decent teams. And I think Cleveland, if they can get it together, is a decent team. They got some parts. They got Donovan Mitchell and they got Jared Allen, who everybody loves, including me. But, you've got some things there in Cleveland that hopefully the Pelicans can put it together and get a tough one on the road. The Pels are a deep team. There's a lot of talent on this team. There's a lot of guys on this team that can play in NBA games and give you something positive. And you need that when you go on the road because I know, you get shorter rotations as you go along, but, man, there are a lot of guys who play well enough to be on the floor. So hopefully the Pels can dig into some of that depth maybe against Cleveland and certainly rebound the way we've seen them be able to rebound because we saw this team get run out of town by Dallas and then come back a couple nights and beat them.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, JD, I mean, you mentioned, it's been a bad matchup in recent seasons for the Pelicans against the Cavs. They lost by double figures both games last year. But I think two reasons why it's been a tough matchup is Darius Garland and Evan Mobley. And both of those guys are out now. So, I mean, on paper, this Cleveland team is definitely more vulnerable than they have been in the past. I think the combination of Mobley and Allen in the paint has been really difficult for the Pelicans, especially in some of the games where Zion hasn't played. So you don't have Garland and Mobley, and you do have Zion, so hopefully for New Orleans that equation will make a big difference in this game.
Final thoughts, sir?
Yeah, I think Pels. I hope the Pels have a bounce back game. Like I said, that one was just so dispiriting. You look at the final score, and you see 115-113. You're like, oh, that was a pretty competitive game. But if you watch the game, you feel you feel a lot let down, and yet. It's game 28 of an 82-game season. So, we're about 1/3 of the way in, and it's like, okay, let's chalk it up to an NBA night, and let's, if you're the Pelicans, build off of that because, you can build off losses, obviously. You know some things about yourself. You know that you get that kind of lead, you can't exhale whatsoever, and you've got to be able to maintain your poise and your composure and your execution because they were executing at a high level in that second quarter. Shot 68% from the field in that quarter and really gave it to them. So it's in you. Now you just got to have it out of you for the entirety of the 4 quarters. We've said that before, and hopefully that'll be something that'll kind of get them back to base to where they play the entire 4.
I'm just going to go LeBron here. When he was questioned about how they're 1-3 since Vegas, he goes, "You see the Pacers record? I'm just good. You see the Suns lost last night? I'm just going to do that. When people, go, hey, look, see the Pels lost? Would you see the Suns lost?
I think Boston coughed up a 17-point lead last night.
Did you see Boston lose? Yeah. Where's that noise?
Yeah. So
to your point, though, that is something that I guess we do need to focus on, right? It is a long season. And look, the Western Conference isn't going to change. Yeah. This is going to be by the week, and Jim and I talk about this every week when he does his Western Conference Wednesdays. You're going to go from 2nd to 7th, from 7th to 5th, from 5th to 10th. It's all jumbled up for a reason because they're going to beat up on one another. So it's trying to avoid the dreaded, 4 and 6 in the last 10, right? As long as I think, JD, you stay 6 and 4, you can get a stretch or two where you go 7 and 3 and 10. You're there. It's got to stay above 510 game stretches.
Exactly. You're basically 4 and 1 in the last 5 now since you lost that one. So 3 and 2s and 4 and 2s and 6 and 3s. All these add up, and I understand. And appreciate. I shouldn't say it. I need to add that I appreciate the fan base. I do appreciate the fan base.
I love passion.
But when you take one game and magnify it to such a degree in the NBA, that is maybe insanity or absurd is what I'm looking for. It's crazy.
So on a talk show today, we shouldn't ask for trades and we shouldn't fire people.
Look, man, I'm seeing
move
people.
The team.
You're seeing people looking for trades, and hey, let's get rid of these 4 guys for this one guy, and it's like, dude, just take a deep breath. This team is winning right now, and it's finding itself. And we've been praying for health for what? 59 straight years or something. So you finally get some help. Okay. You finally get the guys out there. Okay, you want to give them a chance to see what they're doing. Okay, before last night, they were 16-11. That's pretty good. 16-12 ain't bad. So now if you can string together a few more wins, especially here before the new year, man, everything looks a lot better. And, maybe you're 20-12 or you're 20-13 or whatever it is, but you feel a lot better about where the team is because the team does seem to be moving in a good direction.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to unbookmark trademachine.com, unfollow Fletcher. No, I'm kidding. I was about
to say I was going to give a shout out to my man Fletcher, but I didn't want to give him that justice.
To your point, though, I do love that because, look, I do a talk show, too, and we're going to get calls, and we always do, and even in the postgame. I would much rather a fan base that wants to play general manager, head coach, wants to write stories and break it down like Eichenhofer or JD, give me analysis. I would much rather that than we sit there and we're talking about this team in games, and it's cricket. So I'm all about that, right? Yeah. The more people that want to change things or have their say on how to make things better, the better.
Yeah, it is. But I always caution people, and I always say this, okay, if you don't want a guy and you want him traded, what makes you think that the team you want to trade him to wants him?
Yeah.
What makes him so valuable that team would want him in exchange for one of the guys that's really good that you want? And you say, let's just give him these 3 guys. Well, you don't want those 3 guys. What makes you think they want those 3 guys?
That's how it works. Right? Yes. So I always love that. Get rid of them. Okay, what are you getting back for them? I don't know. That's how it works.
Other front offices across the NBA do watch other NBA teams and other NBA games.
I do want to add one final thing here before you get out of here. And poor JD probably. Are you going straight to the airport here? Because everyone's leaving today, right?
No,
you guys
we're
are
not going
there.
quite yet. But it won't be long.
Are y'all going to high five in the tarmac? Because y'all probably leave around the same time, right?
You know what? I didn't think. Yeah. I think we're going to leave a little bit behind the Pelicans.
Just a little bit?
I think a little bit behind.
To that point, though, look, you travel with both teams, and you understand this well, and you're always around the locker room. As much as you could see it yesterday with those guys, right? And it does bother them. We've seen the Saints, turn things around and play hard, not quit and give up. And we're seeing, obviously, this team after that Vegas game go on a 4-game win streak. As much as we care, we're just talking about the fan base and stuff. A loss like that can bother these players. And I think for what you've seen with this team, I think we're going to see a good performance tomorrow. I really do.
If I'd be a lot more worried if it didn't bother the players than if it didn't bother the fans. If those guys have a game like last night and they don't feel some kind of way about it, like they want to get back on the court as soon as possible. Like I would hope they wanted to get back on the court last night at 10:30 and play another game. That's what I want to see out of the locker room. I don't want to see guys, kind of looking at their phones and giggling or anything like that. And not to say that is indicative of a guy's care.
Sure.
But I want to see guys, hurt a little bit. It's a regular season game. I get it. And you got a lot more of them, but I want to see it bother you some, because I want you to be thinking to yourself, we let one get away. We can't do that again. And and you see that in the locker rooms. I think, I want guys to feel like, what, man, God dang it, not necessarily those words, but, we gave one away.
Yeah.
And then how do we not give another one away like that?
And you know what's beautiful about that, JD? The Grizzlies are actually here next Tuesday, so they're going to have another immediate chance to answer to what happened in the game on Tuesday. No doubt.
Basically, what fans need to understand is what the radio booth is like after a game. Todd didn't even say bye. He just walked in and walked out. That's how it works. I can always tell how the game goes depending on whether or not I get a fist bump. That's where we win. Or a simple, just slow closing of the door. It's not even like the Kramer Seinfeld style where the door just slams. It's just a
look. That's my dude, and I just don't know. I don't know how Graf hadn't had like a heart attack or something. It's amazing to me that his emotions can rise to that level, and they can plunge to the depths of that level. And it's like, I'll give him this now. He says he's an acquired taste. He's either wide open or he's like at the bottom of the valley, and there ain't a whole lot of in between.
I will say this. My kid loves Ghostbusters. You have like the Ghostbuster detector and stuff. The one thing that Todd does have, though, you can call it the harbinger of doom or something, but he can tell you, here comes a run. It could be a play in the third quarter. He's like, go back to that. I'm like, how do you even know that beforehand? But to your point, he has a good sense and feel how that game sort of goes. And that's something that, that's part of why we're a part of the game. And we follow it. But I do think this team bounces back. But to that point, when they come back home, and we'll see you again on Saturday at the arena, that's an important stretch here. Utah is a team that you haven't beaten for some reason. You got the Lakers. This could be like the revenge home tour, right? You got the Lakers game on New Year's Eve. Jim, you have Utah that you didn't beat earlier. They got 2 games from you. You have Memphis that just got you as well. Houston. This legitimately is the revenge home tour.
It's even more the revenge tour than we even initially thought now that the game against Memphis happened. Yeah, I think just about every team on this homestand, other than Brooklyn at the end, I think you've already played and maybe lost to. So, yeah, this is an opportunity to show even some of the differences between the way that you looked in October and November and the team that you are now.
Yeah, the good thing about it is it's a long season, and you're always looking for ways to generate, some kind of passion if you're players, because it gets monotonous. And if you got a genuine dislike for the opponent or a genuine reason to where you want a little get back, then that helps you out. That helps you out a lot in the NBA because, like I said, it can get monotonous. And if you're the Pelicans, you're looking at that schedule like, okay, we lost to this one, we lost to this one, we lost to this one. We got ran out by this one. We want to get a little revenge. I know, people might kind of say, it's the NBA, man. It's early. Look, when a team beats you and you feel like you should win the game, you remember that. And when the team beats you like the Lakers beat this team, you remember that. You remember how you looked in that game, and you remember what folks said about you after that game.
Well, the fans will as well, too. I can tell you what. At John Deshazier is the way to give a follow over on X or Twitter. Give a kind and, generous little hello to you on Twitter. It's always a good thing.
Yeah, always. I can't respond generally the way I would normally respond, but it's always great to hear from folks. It's always great to see the replies. It's always great to see the passion. Like I said, like we said, you'd rather see a passionate fan base than one that doesn't care.
No doubt. And we always try to incorporate that here as well in our broadcast, in our podcast, kind of a touch and feel how everyone is. Safe travel, sir. We'll see you again. Hopefully bring home a win from L.A., and we'll see you on Saturday.
Thank you very much. Hopefully so. We'll be back early Friday.
Oh, you're coming straight in, huh?
Yeah, we're coming
awesome.
Straight in.
4 a.m. I'll hear you fly over the house.
Yeah, I think we're supposed to land at 5.
Yeah,
so.
That's close enough. There it is. I had to drop off my parents at 5 this morning.
Friday
it's dark and cold.
Yeah, Friday ain't going to be a pretty day, I can tell you that.
I hear you. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it. All right, our thanks once again to John Deshazier, color analyst. Safe travels to L.A. Hopefully he brings home a win with the Rams. And also on Saturday, when he gets back in the booth with the Graf, we can start another home winning streak. That'd be great here as well. We'll see what happens on that front. But it is Western Conference Wednesday, Jim. Just tell me it's not the Lakers that you're going to pick team-wise.
No, it's not the Lakers. I've picked them.
Nice of you.
I picked them earlier in the season. I'm trying to not double up on too many teams.
Actually, you should, because since you have, they're 1-3 since Vegas. So you want to do
That's
the Lakers
true.
again? No, I'm kidding. Who you got?
Yeah, last week's team to watch in the West was Memphis, for obvious reasons. They lost twice to Houston, including a game where Dylan Brooks made a dagger 3 at the end. They lost at Oklahoma City, and then unfortunately they won last night against New Orleans. Interesting stretch. They have 4 of their next 5 games are on the road, so that'll be kind of a team to watch for last week, but also to keep an eye on in terms of where they are in the standings and them trying to get closer to the 10th spot in the play-in tournament. But my team to watch this week is Phoenix, and Phoenix is interesting because everyone's been waiting all season. Okay, so when are they going to have Durant, Booker, and Beal all together? And every time it looks like they're going to have all 3. Someone gets injured, Beal's out again. But I think to some extent too, though, what I think is concerning, and maybe I shouldn't speak for Suns fans or the Suns team, but they're still not winning games even with 2 of the 3. You would think that with Durant and Booker, I know they had to sign a lot of minimum contract guys to fill out the rest of the roster, but still, it seems like they've had some losses that are a little eye-opening. They lost to Portland last night, and the Trailblazers hadn't won a game in quite some time. So they're barely above 500, and part of why I picked them as the team to watch this week is they have a light schedule. They only have 2 games, but they play at Sacramento on Friday, and then they host the Mavericks on Christmas. But they're in a position where they really are. It's starting to get a little dicey as far as them even being in the top 10 of the standings. Mm-hmm. They're 14-13 right now. Golden State is 13-14 in 11th place. So I mean, they only have a 1-game lead over just being in that final play-in tournament spot. So Phoenix is the team to watch, and couple tough opponents on their schedule. I'm curious to see how they do. And then actually coming out of Christmas, they're at Houston on the 27th, and then they have a 6-game homestand. So maybe that'll be their chance to get right when they have so many games at home. But it's been troubling the way that they've played lately, for sure.
Yeah. That was a nasty looking ankle injury that happened to him as well. But look, here's the thing. Even with the Grizzlies before Ja came back and all that, teams are different when you don't have your guys. And I think that's the one thing that if you're a Pels fan, and as John just pointed out, 16-12, you have your guys. Now you got to go out there and learn to win with with your group and handle the ups and downs of a season. It just is what it is. Sometimes you come through, sometimes you don't. But that's the thing that I think it is good. Right now, help is good when it comes to the Pelicans, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, despite the loss on Tuesday, I mean, they've been playing so much better lately. Obviously now won 4 out of their last 5 games. Even though I think understandably a lot of people around the league were like, yeah, the winning streak was against a lot of teams that weren't very good, but they also started it with a victory over the Timberwolves. So that was a pretty impressive way to start that stretch. But yeah, now you're going into a span of games where, we talked about, the revenge tour. A little quick math I did while we were talking, the first 4 games that the Pelicans have on this homestand after they play Cleveland, they're combined 1-5 against those 4 teams. Mm-hmm. So it is even more, to an even greater extent than I really even thought, as far as you're 0-1 against Houston, you're 1-1 against Memphis, 0-2 against the Jazz, and 0-1 against the Lakers, and then you end that road or that homestand against the Nets, who you haven't played yet, home or away. So interesting stretch of games, but important to try to beat Cleveland on Thursday night, and then I think get back home and try to, Tuesday night notwithstanding, they've been playing really good basketball in the Smoothie King Center.
Yeah, no doubt. The revenge tours, like we'll call it here as well. I mean, I'm so used to, every time there's concerts at the arena, there's always some catchy little phrase or slogans. So maybe you can come up with a couple of them for Friday. How about that?
Yeah, maybe we should get some posters together, maybe some billboards we could put up around the city.
We'll do that.
The revenge tour.
You really like doing those polls on X or Twitter. How about, give us some suggestions as to what we will call this homestand.
Week of Vengeance, maybe. Revenge tour.
Something.
Payback.
Yeah, I love that.
Payback
at
time.
The blender. Yeah, for sure. Well, let's wrap it up, and then we will get back with you again here on Friday, hopefully talking about another win, and as we said, previewing a pretty big homestand and close out the calendar year. It's hard to believe, man, closing out the calendar year.
Yeah, it really is, and we'll be here Friday, and then we'll have a little break because Monday is Christmas, so we will not be recording on Monday. But yeah, looking forward to previewing the homestand. We'll have that Houston game on Saturday, and then Memphis again on Tuesday before we're back at it next week. But looking forward to speaking with you in a couple days.
Well, that's disappointing to hear. I was looking forward to sitting by the fireplace with you with some eggnog, maybe some adult eggnog, if you know what I'm getting at there. The fire crackling, things of that nature.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
It's not invited to the Eichenhofer.
Well, I mean, we could still record, but it just won't be on the podcast. We can still talk basketball,
we can still
but
just
it
talk,
yeah.
I'll FaceTime you. How about that?
There you go.
Exactly.
Perfect.
I'm going to need a little relaxation after Christmas Day, if you know what I mean. As always, appreciate the time. Give Jim a follow at Jim_Eichenhofer. So do so, and of course, Pelicans.com. See you soon, bud.
See you, Gus.
All right, and thank you for listening to the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast. Join us 3 times per week on Pelicans.com, the Pelicans mobile app, or you can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. We'll see you next time right here on the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast